is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 732. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, I saw BK was over.
Yeah, we're hanging out today. Actually, we got a whole crew over here. BK, Raptor, Matt Nass, my brother, they're all hanging out because it's Matt Nass's birthday today. And
happy birthday to Matt Nass.
I'm actually cooking some soup for dinner. So,
do you mean GP Oakland champion Matt Nass?
The one and only.
Wow, incredible! And you get to have him over to your house, and you're making him soup too.
Yeah, I asked him what he wanted me to make, and he said chicken tortilla soup. So that's what we're going with.
Yeah, that's his favorite thing. Good, though. Is that it though? Or are you like?
No, I'm gonna make some carne asada and serve a taco bar on the side too.
Okay, good. You didn't let me down.
Yeah, some salsa and guac and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure.
All right, good. This is getting better and better by the minute. Well, happy birthday to Matt Nass, and as his birthday present, we're gonna do a Q&A episode this week. You're welcome, Matt. We've got questions from our patrons. That's the way that you can ask us direct questions. I'll put up a thread before we do the show. I actually got it up a little late this time, but our patrons came to the rescue. We've got a bunch of questions to answer. And again, the Patreon is patreon.com/limited resources. If you'd like to support the show directly, that is the way to do it. It's kind of the backbone of shows like ours. And we really appreciate everybody who does it. If you do end up going over to Patreon and supporting us, you will get a thank you card and a Limited Resources sticker that you could put on your water bottle, laptop, car, whatever. Just throw it in a drawer, whatever you want to do with it. And that's regardless of the level that you sign up for and for how long you sign up. So there you go. Patreon.com/limited resources. The show is also brought to you by Ultimate Guard. That's right. Ultimate Guard is the best of the best. They make the absolute best products to protect your cards. That's right. If you, have a card collection of any sort, if you have decks that you like to play with, whether it's Commander, constructed decks, or even if you just like to bring your own supplies to each draft that you do and sleeve up, you're going to need sleeves. We love the katana sleeves from Ultimate Guard, but they have a full line there as well. You're probably going to need a deck box to hold that kind of stuff, whether it's a pre-constructed deck or even for limited play. And then, you might even need a longer box to hold multiple decks if you really get into it, or to organize your cards when they're at home. And they have all of those things at Ultimate Guard. You can check them out at ultimateguard.com and see all their products. You can buy their products at your favorite online retailer or your favorite LGS. Thanks so much, Ultimate Guard, for your support of the show. We really appreciate it. Luis, no fluff this week. We're just going to get right into the questions. And as usual, our patrons, they understood the assignment. For these Q&A episodes, we do a Patreon question of the week that we do once per episode. And those ones tend to be about the set that's out or cube or something like that. But for the Patreon question of the week, we really open it up. Basically, any topic is open. And so, yeah, that's what we've got here. So let's start off with a first question from Patrick, who says, "Hi, guys. I've been a Patreon supporter for several years now and love listening to the podcast on my drive to and from work." Thanks, Patrick. I will be heading on a cruise to Alaska in September. Luis, remember you and I went on Alaska cruise.
It's the only cruise I've ever gone on.
Me too.
It was a fun cruise, and it was enough cruises to last me. Well, it hasn't run out yet.
Yeah. And on that cruise, I paid $50 for a foil Evolving Wilds and a foil
Woodfall
Primus. And I never got the foil Woodfall Primus from that transaction. You'll be shocked to hear.
Yeah.
That was fun, that part of it. But yeah, we actually, Luis and I had a great time. We really bonded on that cruise. We played tons of Magic, hung out, ate food. It was a Magic themed cruise, by the way. At the time they were doing those, and Luis was one of the special guests on there, and I got invited to go too. So I went in. It ended up being really cool. But anyway, Patrick's going on sounds like a similar one in September. He says, "I'll be starting out in Seattle for a couple of days beforehand. Marshall, would you happen to have any great food recommendations while my wife and I are in town? Thanks, and keep rocking it." Oh, you bet I do, Patrick. So as you may know, I don't know where you're from, Patrick, but here in Seattle and in much of the West Coast, we have particular access to great Asian foods. right? This is a strong point for our area. And that happens to be my favorite type of food, whether kind of across the board. Chinese food tends to be my favorite, but I mean, I eat Thai food, I eat Korean food all the time. Vietnamese food is a total staple here as well. So some of the places that I would recommend checking out, one of my favorite restaurants is Taiwanese based, and it's called Din Tai Fung, if you've ever heard of it. They're famous for their soup dumplings, and there's one of them downtown here. There's a few of them in the area, but there's one downtown where I assume you'll be staying before you catch your ship. So I would recommend that. One of my favorite.
DTF.
The old DTF. I love it. There's an alternative to it as well if there's a long wait or if the prices are scaring you off, and it's called Dough Zone. It's very similar to Din Tai Fung, especially the soup dumplings are almost identical. And then they have a slightly different complementing menu with fewer items, but it's quite a bit cheaper and the wait is always less. So that's also an option as well. One of my favorite restaurants here as well, it's one of my go-tos, is called Babar, B-A and then space B-A-R, Babar. And it
like
is...
the elephant.
Is that what it is?
Babar the elephant? You never read those books when you were a kid?
Maybe I did. That does ring a bell. Is that why they called it that?
I mean, I don't know. But
where was the elephant from?
The elephant was...
Is he an African elephant or an Asian elephant?
I believe it was an African elephant. I think these were like French books. But
okay. Yeah. Okay. So this probably isn't that, but maybe. Anyway, and this is Vietnamese food, but it's kind of, this is like such a terrible word to use, but maybe it's the right one. It's elevated. It's not like super high end or anything. It's a very casual restaurant, but they really, really put a lot of thought into many of the staple foods that you find at Vietnamese restaurants here, pho being kind of the main one, but their pho is fantastic. You could even just get the normal pho Thai Nam or pho Thai, just the basics, and it's really, really good, but they have some really cool twists on it as well. Vermicelli noodle bowls there are fantastic. I get those every once in a while as well. And then they have a bunch of really good appetizers too. So I would definitely recommend that on my list. And then a place that I've been going to recently, it's about 8 or 9 miles north of downtown Seattle in a city called Edmonds, where I used to live. And there's a restaurant there called Fire and the Feast that I've really liked. It's Italian. They have pizza, they have pasta, but it's really, really good stuff. I have yet to find anything bad there. And then I have to mention this because it's Seattle. If you want a quick burger, my favorite burger in the world, not to be confused with the best burger in the world, but my favorite burger in the world is from Dick's Drive-In. And there's a 5 or 6 they've actually expanded recently after 40 years of not expanding, but they've only opened a restaurant or 2 extra. But there's multiple, there's one in Capitol Hill, there's one in Queen Anne Hill, if you're here in downtownish area. And they opened in 1954. Like literally my dad used to hang out there with his high school friends in their cars and, have milkshakes and race. And I mean, this place has been around forever and they haven't changed. So it's still like a walk up. You drive in, you get out of your car, you walk up, and they have the same menu since I was a kid. They've never added anything to it or taken away anything from it. And you can't augment the burgers. Like it's really old school 50s style burger place, but it's beloved here. Absolutely beloved. And it is, again, it is my favorite burger in the world. If I could only have one more burger, it would be a Dick's Deluxe, but it is a 50 style drive-in. So don't expect anything super, super fancy or whatever, but you got to go to Dick's while you're in Seattle. Luis, do you have any Seattle restaurants that you've been here a number of times?
One of my favorite breakfasts in Seattle is from Lola.
Yes.
This is one of the chain of restaurants. I don't remember the guy's name anymore.
Oh, I'll remember it. Keep going. Yeah.
But there's he owns a bunch of restaurants in Seattle, and Lola is actually it's like kind of attached to one of the hotels there, but it was a hotel where we stayed for the World Championships one year. So we had breakfast in the hotel, and it's like, oh, wow, this is an amazing breakfast. They just do like I don't know, eggs, smashed potatoes, and like a side of meat, and it's just really good. They actually have like a Greek breakfast that's just like an octopus, and
Yeah.
they do some good stuff. That I almost always go there when I'm in Seattle.
Yeah. You and I went there with, I think, and maybe both your brothers one
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
when PAX, that was the Worlds that Seth Manfield beat Owen in the finals.
Yeah, so that was cool. It's Tom Douglas, by the way, is the restaurateur. Yeah, I got a chance to meet him once. He was really nice. A number of his restaurants have shut down, but the ones that are still open, there's some people that just get it, right? This guy opened 11 or 12 restaurants in the Seattle area, and they were all different. Like,
yeah,
they didn't have any overlap. Lola is his Mediterranean, Greek style, whatever, but like, the breakfast is more traditional, like you said, except for the octopus stuff that you can get. But he has restaurants across the board, fish place, pasta, all that. His pizza place is called Serious Pie. And if you love pizza, that is one of the best pizzas you can get.
Oh yeah, Serious Pie is great also.
Yeah, he had a place called Serious Biscuit, which was like a biscuit breakfast place. I mean, these things don't have anything in common, and he just stuck the landing on all of it. Thanks for the question, Patrick, and have a good time when you're here. Douglas says, with pro play back, I've been interested in actually attending LCQs. I live in a big city, but in Canada, and it looks like Douglas lives in Vancouver. It feels like there are very few qualifiers. Not sure what it feels like across the border. Unsure if this is just life in Canada or if stores are just less interested these days. As a follow-up, it might be nice to have an up-to-date explanation of how organized play on MTGO actually works. As a relative newcomer, it can be confusing. Yeah, man, I'm confused by, honestly, both of those systems currently as well. My friend Woody, he's been like, hey, should I be like trying to qualify for stuff? And I said, yeah. And I told him the broad strokes, path where it's like you qualify at a local store, you make it to a regional championship. And then if you do well there, you can make it to the pro tour. And if you do really, really well there over a season, you can make it to world championship. But like, that's kind of all I know about it. Like, I'm not, doing coverage means that I can't play in the things anyway. So it's not like I'm out grinding on the weekends on LCQs. You qualified for an RC, right?
Yeah, I won an RCQ here in Denver because there's an RC in Denver next month actually, and I wanted to play in it. And I wasn't qualified. So
is it that simple? Just find a local game store that's doing an RCQ and start jamming, or?
So I mean, it's not actually like that far off. Basically, you can win an RCQ to play at a regional championship, and each RCQ is for a specific regional championship. And you also have the option of going to the site and playing last chance qualifiers, but it's going to vary pretty wildly. I have no idea how they do it in Canada or like what the availability is. I think it's generally like, do the local stores want to run these tournaments? They can talk to DreamHack about running it. I don't even know how it works. I think they probably buy the slots from DreamHack so they can run these tournaments. But I couldn't come close to explaining how it works on Magic Online. I have no idea. I don't play in any of those things. The thing is, all the big Magic Online high prize tournaments are like, if you do well in this tournament, you're playing on Magic Online for 9 or 10 hours on Saturday or Sunday. That's completely incompatible with my life. I have 2 kids. So I have no idea how these work. Part of why I like the Arena Opens, you can play, kind of when it suits you you can play any time of the day on Saturday. And then on Sunday, it's not that hard to carve out a little time for drafts that are over quick one way or another. You either win and, you're really happy, or you just get eliminated quickly so you don't spend a bunch of time playing in them. I would encourage anyone who's interested in playing to look up a regional championship qualifier or RCQ near you. I think that's probably going to be your best bet, but I don't have a lot of specific guidance, and I'm sure there's a ton of things offered on Magic Online. I just don't really know how that works.
Yeah, you really do have to dedicate, like if you want to be in the Magic Online ecosystem, qualifying for all the things, because there's Magic Online specific events, and then there's events that qualify you for things that aren't on Magic Online. You really have to be in the weeds to do it, and neither Luis nor I are at this point. But good luck, Douglas. Hopefully you can find your way to a regional championship and then to the Pro Tour and come up and say hi. Next one comes from Luis, different Luis. This is actually Manowar Elves. Hey, I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts about the difficulty of getting to Mythic. Some players seem to suggest that it's more contingent on grinding tons of drafts than on playing well or having a strong win rate. How often do you guys make Mythic? How long does it take you? And how easy do you find the Enterprise?
I've made Mythic a couple times. It is, I mean, this is just like the cube trophy race or any ladder system where it's largely a function of win rate times time, where if you, the more you win, the less time you have to spend in order to accomplish the goal, because if you win 51% of your matches, you'll eventually get to Mythic. It'll just take you a long time. If you win 70% of your matches, you'll get there pretty quickly. Now, if you want to get to Mythic number 1, that's like a completely different animal. There, you have to have a high win rate and play a lot. Like you can never get to Mythic number 1 at like a 50-some win rate. It's just not possible.
No way.
But I'm not taking away anything from the act of hitting Mythic or any particular rank on any system. But a lot of the ladder systems for online games, it is ultimately what your win rate is will determine how much time it takes you to get there. If you keep that win rate and put in that time, you will eventually get there, and that's fine. That's not even like a bad system necessarily. I don't think it's generally good when like tournament qualifications are given away based on Mythic ranking, because that puts people into kind of unhealthy situation of like, all right, time to play 18 hours of Magic a day to try to stay in the Mythic top 10, like they did for the invitational in Boston, right? Where the top 8 Mythic players at the end of this month got an invite. And it was just like ridiculous how much these people had to play just to try to squeak in there. So yeah, I don't think that is an ideal scenario, but overall, like if you want Mythic to be a test of your dedication, it is that. If you want Mythic to, like you try to get to Mythic every month and you're like, wow, I got there a lot faster this month. Yeah, that shows something too. Does Mythic mean you're better than someone who isn't? No, of course not. And like I think that it's something that you can use in a lot of ways, but do I think it's does it demonstrate a whole lot besides dedication? Not really. Like, I mean, you can get what you want out of it.
Yeah, because like I agree with everything you said. I'd want to frame it also in terms of like, okay, so that's a good explanation about getting to Mythic. You mentioned that you need to, have a much higher win rate to try to make a run for Mythic 1. And I remember that especially when it first started on Arena, that like Mythic was a thing at all. And then people would start to post about if they got to Mythic 1. And I do remember a lot of the pros at the time kind of scoffing at it a little bit, like, okay, dude, but like, that's not that big of an accomplishment, right? Again, relative to the professional scene, winning a Pro Tour, winning a Grand Prix, top 8ing something, whatever. That's true, right? And that's because of that time part of it where we don't know how long, how many matches you played to get to that point type thing.
Yeah. I mean, I would never suggest that someone scoff at someone's accomplishment, but I also think that
But you also know professional Magic players, so.
Well, that, and also it depends on what someone's saying. Like I have seen players saying like, I got to Mythic number 1, so I was the best player in the world.
I'm the best player in the world. Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, clearly that's not really what that does either. But
right.
I think
I remember that.
Yeah. It's tricky. I will say that some of these conversations also happened. The rise of Arena kind of coincided, and not completely by coincidence, with them eliminating the Pro Tour. So there's a lot of people who are feeling at the same time that
true.
That's a good point. Longer get any gameplay opportunities. Now being number 1 in Arena is like the only thing that can happen, and people are talking about how that is the thing, and it's like this really feels like not the thing.
That's a good point. That did coincide with that time frame,
which I think is fine to explain kind of where people were at. But it is just funny that, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's like, I wouldn't denigrate anyone for saying this is an accomplishment, because it is an accomplishment, and you should be proud of it, and it's totally great. What it also doesn't prove a whole lot about your skill relative to other people's. And so when people try to use this as, proof that they're better than other people, like, I don't like that either.
Me too. That's the only thing that bothers me. And, he asked how often we've gotten to Mythic. And, my answer is I've gotten to Mythic every time I cared to try, which has been numerous times. But most of the time it's just like, well, I fit drafting into my normal life, right? Like I'll draft if a TV show's on, because I don't really like to just sit there and watch TV. And I'll draft if I feel like it, to take a break or to do whatever. But in order to get to Mythic, I have to play more than I normally would. And that happens sometimes where I just feel like grinding, or maybe I don't have as much going on, or I really like the format or whatever. And I'll be like, all right, let's do this, But the thing you have to remember about the way that these ranking systems work is that they ladder up. And once you reach a certain level, you can't go back below it, right? So it is inevitable that you will reach Mythic given enough time if your win rate is above 50%. And probably even if it's below, right? Because you just need to string together some number of wins to get you to the next level, and then you can't fall down. So, I don't consider it a major accomplishment or anything to get Mythic. I think any competent player can do it if they just want to put in the time. I do think it's a reflection of the fact that you put in that effort. And I think that is cool, that you said, you know what, I'm gonna set a personal goal and I'm gonna try to make Mythic. I think that's really cool, and I think the system's really well designed in that way, like you said, Luis. I think that it is set up the way that I would do it too, because you want this achievable, right? You want this to be a thing that, like, if you're really, really good, you just cruise right up to it. But if you're like working on your game and you're grinding, that it's an achievable goal. And if it knocked you all the way back down to zero, if you had like a big losing streak, it would be really, really difficult. And there would be many, many times that you tried hard and still didn't make it. And that's starting to get to the point where, like, you may just give up. The incentives aren't really there, because it is hard. Like, it takes a lot of matches, at whatever my win rate is, it takes me a while. It's not like it's like, oh, it's been a week, I'm at Mythic, right? It does take a lot of time to do. And it is a sort of a concerted effort. And I think it's cool to be able to see yourself go up as well. Thanks, Luis, for the question. Next question comes from Rollins, who says, hey, guys, I noticed that there's a lot of, quote, evergreen sealed discussion out. I'm starting to ramp up for a sealed tournament for Karlov Manor, and wondering if you guys have any tips on playing sealed in a competitive environment. I know that sealed is slower generally and you should prioritize bombs, but I'm wondering if you guys have insight that goes a little beyond that. And he says, edit, for a more specific question, if you have a pool that isn't super busted, what are some of the best ways to increase your win percentage with your build, knowing your opponents might have far better pools than you?
So in general, some other things that go a little deeper are most sets you want to main deck an artifact or enchantment removal thing, or even something that kills flyers and almost assuredly counterspells and discard. All those cards types have gotten quite a bit better, or get quite a bit better once sealed is in the mix, just because there's more in your pool. No matter which colors you pick, is there going to be a playable artifact? I mean, the odds just go up because you always open a couple of them. It depends set to set, of course. Same with like flyers, but flyers are very tempting to run in sealed, so I bias a little bit more heavily towards something that can deal with flyers. Likewise, the games end up being slower and people tend to play their bombs, which usually are expensive cards. So counterspells and discard get quite a bit better. Like, that's probably the biggest delta, where it's like a card like a negate, counter target non-creature spell, or mind rot. Like, these are all cards that I'm looking for, that they're pulling me towards their colors in sealed, which makes them closer to a B in sealed than the kind of like C to D that they end up being in draft, or like sideboard cards.
That's right. Also, consistency matters a lot. One thing that you'll see a lot from people that have bomb heavy pools is they'll try to play all of them. And there are some formats where you can get away with that, but there are definitely times when it's like, look, you've got 3 really great cards, but you got to put one of them in the sideboard so that you can cast the other 2. And people won't do that. And so if your pool's underpowered, less bomb laden, one edge that you can get is by having really good mana and making decisions during your build process that are less greedy, so that you will enable a consistent, straightforward game plan. Yes, it is underpowered. Yes, if your opponent gets to start resolving bombs, you are going to lose, but at least give yourself the chance of just putting creatures' power and toughness on the battlefield, killing a couple of theirs and turning your thing sideways to get them dead for the times when they do stumble on their mana, when they are trying to play too many bombs, when their curve is a bit too high. If you can find a admittedly underpowered but more consistent build, that can give you a chance. Because remember, there's no miracles here, right? There are going to be pools that are just straight up better than yours and that you are going to be an underdog to. But you have to find a way to put forward a game plan that can meet those as close as you can get to the middle. And, oftentimes you'll see people get panicky when they have what they deem to be like a bad pool, and then they'll try to maximize the power level of it by including everything that's even remotely good in their pool and decimating their mana base to do so. And you'll even hear them say, well, if I draw my mana, my deck's actually pretty good. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But if you're playing a 9-round tournament, like, sorry, that's not how that works. You're not going to draw your mana often enough to justify it. So, it can be useful to know, what? I just need to play these creatures. And again, we talk about Cab's theory sometime on here, right? Where you're just playing these cards that affect the board. If you can find one of those decks in sealed, I know everybody else is doing sweet stuff, drawing cards. They got this artifact that does this thing. They got this bomb. They got this mana fixer. But if you can just put creatures, power and toughness on the battlefield, sometimes you can really punish people who are trying a little too hard. These are ways just to try to recoup some of the deficit that you have. But I always find it better that if I know what my deck's game plan is, even if I admit that it is not the one that I would have chosen, sitting down to open up my pool, that at least I give myself a chance to just consistently put forth that game plan and kind of make my opponent, like punish my opponents who are too greedy. Because that does happen all the time. I mean, I think we've all sat next to the player who opens up the bombs and could have had a perfectly awesome 2-color deck with their bombs and just somehow decided to double splash this double red card or whatever. And you're just like, wow, there goes your whole mana base. And yeah, that is the best card in your deck, but you are opening yourself up to some losses, some self-inflicted wounds, as it were.
At the end of the day, everyone's going to have bombs because you're opening 6 packs. They each could have like 5 rares in them these days. Who knows?
Yeah.
and the cards are good now. There's not that many cards that are bad. So if you can't beat some of the better cards in the set by having your own high power level, lots of removal deck, you can look for discard. You can look for counter spells, especially if like game 1, they show you they have like a 6 mana bomb that wins the game and like a 7 mana bomb that wins the game. There's some pools like that. Then I'm like, all right, if I get a 3 mana counter in my deck, that's going to be really good against those.
Totally.
When you play against like the 4 mana bombs that win the game, that's a little harder. That's part of why those cards are so savage. And like you mentioned, the other way about it is if you can build a good 2-color aggro deck, that can be an effective strategy as well.
Yeah. I mean, the main idea is you don't want to try to beat them at their own game if you don't have the tools and they do, right? That you want to try to find some other way to approach the game.
The first deck I always try to build in every sealed format, just like in the dark, is the like 2 and a splash to 3 and a splash deck that's playing like the majority of my best cards, whatever the best combination of bombs plus removal is. If that deck doesn't look like it's good enough, then I start looking at like, okay, do I have a better aggro deck? Do I have a deck that's maybe a little less consistent but has a higher power level? Like those are the kind of things I think that you want to look for.
I do the same thing. Next question comes from Ryan, who says, "Hey guys, love the podcast. I'm wondering what you think the better question is. How can I lose this game? Yeah. How can I lose this game? Or how can I win this game?" This to me seems when, right? When are you asking this question?
Yeah, it's all context dependent. When you're behind, you got to ask, how can I win? When you're ahead, you got to ask, how can I lose? That's really what it is.
That is like, what it is. And the further you're
the person
behind,
winning, you ask how things can go wrong and you to lose. If you're the person losing, you ask how can things go right and for me to win. It's just you've probably seen me do this if you watched me play a million times. I'm ahead and I start going through these ridiculous lengths to make sure they don't even have like a single out. I'm like,
or even 2-card combinations.
Doing a whole combo so it's like not taking 5 extra turns to kill them to make sure that I can have 2 counters up at all times. That sort of thing. Whereas when you're losing, it's like, all right, I'm gonna take this attack, go down to 1 with the Dark Confidant and play, because in order to win, I need to flip land number 6, take no damage, then draw my 6-drop Winds of Abandon, and then I'll win the game. Like you go from like trying to eliminate even this fraction of a chance they can get in the door to, scrabbling for that last fraction of a chance you can win the game. It all depends on how badly you're doing. The trickiest part is honestly when the game's really close and just in the middle, then it's like, okay, am I playing to win this game or playing not to lose this game? I guess, we're not sure. But there's a lot of games where it's like, I'm a 5%, I have 5% equity in this game. So I need to take these really risky lines to get that equity higher. Or I have a 95% equity in this game. I need to take absolutely no risks at all because I'm going to win the game. That's right. And those are the judgment calls, by the way, that you develop a sense for after you play Magic for a while is, I always like to think of it in terms of like, if you could just stop time and have LSV show up at your table and say, what's the state of this game? How's it going?
right? It's like, could you tell him I'm way behind? Like I am screwed here, right? And then the question becomes, well, what are you going to do to try to scrap out 2 or 3 more win percentage points from this position? Even knowing that we're talking about going from 15 to 19%. Like, you are in bad shape. You are almost never winning this game. Are there any card sequences, any things that you could do if we make assumptions that all go in your favor? Could you pick up a win? Meaning all 4 cards in your opponent's hand are lands and they're going to draw another one. And you're going to draw exactly the next 2 cards you draw are going to be exactly what you need. Is there a win there? Right? Because if you're not looking for it, you're definitely not going to find it in that type of situation. And it goes the other way too. How far ahead are you? Well, what could go wrong here? If we map out our opponent's next 3 draw steps, are there cards that we've seen from their deck or in this format? Again, within reality, right? It's not, you don't need to go like, oh, they're going to draw 3 Orcish Bowmasters in a row because their pool had, that's not the type of things we do.
Right. Like I don't play around wraths that often in game 1 when I don't have a reason to think they have a wrath.
Right.
Because wraths are like specifically one of the kinds of cards that you tend to lose a lot of equity when you try to play around.
Definitely. And, and I would say if Luis showed up and you said, I'm crushing, like I'm on cruise control, I can't lose this game. I would want our imaginary time stop Luis to say, well, is there actually a way you could lose the game? Again, living on planet Earth here. And it's like, if I run this spell that I think is going to win me the game into a counter, I could wait a turn, that type of thing. And you start doing those. And the question flips each time for you, Ryan. So that's a really great question or set of questions that you asked. And that is exactly how you should approach it. The interesting part to me about this is that knowing when to ask, how can I lose this game? How can I win this game? Is already a skill and something interesting, because you have to have an inherent sense of I'm behind or I'm ahead. And that develops over time as you play a lot of Magic. And, a lot of times you can just look at the board and compare it with your hand and kind of go, I'm kind of out of gas and I don't have an answer for that thing that's killing me. So I'm behind. Okay, fine. So you figured that part out. But the next level of that is once you get to the point where you have a good understanding of whether you're ahead or you're behind, it's all about your judgment calls from there on out. That to me, that thing right there is exactly what separates Luis from like an average pro player, is that he makes those decisions better than an average professional player. And obviously than the rest of us, is that he is aware of his situation and then reacts to it accordingly. And the thing when this signs up, Luis, you mentioned a minute ago that if people watch you draft, I wonder where they could do that. That one of the things that pops up a lot in your videos that always stands out to me is, like, let's say you have to mulligan and you have to put back a card that you could use. Like, let's say it's a red mana source or a green mana source or a land that you actually need, and then it doesn't work out. A lot of times you'll frame it as, okay, well, that didn't work out, but in my mind, I needed to draw this in order to win this game. Like, if I had put the other card back, I'm just sort of resigning myself to losing anyway. In other words, you understood that I need to get a little bit fortunate here and hit a red source out of the top 3 of my library if this game is going to win in my favor. You could have taken the much less risky route, put some other card back, kept your safe red source, but you looked at that set of cards and said, that doesn't win me the game. That's not what's actually going to win. And these are the types of judgments that you could make even as early as the mulligan step. Because if it's game 3, you've seen almost every card from your opponent. You know what the matchup is. You know what you've got. You know almost all the cards that they've got. And if you mulligan, you can say, this is not the type of hand that is going to be able to beat the average hand from my opponent. So you're already in, how can I win this game? Because you're behind. You mulliganed and your opponent's deck is better than yours. And you're willing to now already start taking actions that reflect what needs to happen for you to win the game. And that's a perfect example of what Ryan's talking about here. And that's before there's even a land on the battlefield. And it also shows, by the way, that you're doing it the entire time. Next question comes from Wood, who says, hey guys, I'm finding myself in a bit of a Magic slump right now. And so decided to take a break. And that got me wondering about you all. Do you also sometimes get tired of Magic? If so, how do you handle that as content creators for the game? Thanks for all you guys do. Even when I'm on a Magic break, I still listen to you guys. Thanks, Wood. We appreciate that. Yeah, I would say that is a thing, but Luis and I are pretty resilient to this. Like, if I feel like I'm, not feeling it, I'll usually just play a different version of Magic.
Exactly.
Like it's not because I don't play other games. Like this is the game that I love. And so for me, it's like, well, is the vintage cube up? And then if I get sick of that, it's like, well, what about the format that was going? And then there's always seems to be something coming up to kind of take me in a different direction. There are a few times where there hasn't been a vintage cube and the set kind of sucked. And it's like, I don't really feel like playing it. And then I'll kind of just sit for a little while, but that's very rare. And I've been at this for 15 years and Luis has been at it for, pushing twice that.
I generally have not found that I get too bored just because of, like you said, like switching from, playing whatever the limited format is at the time to cube or constructed to cube or, sometimes I generally don't even play that much constructed anymore. I do like constructed, but I guess the amount I was playing over the last, 10 years when I was more actively playing on the Pro Tour 10, 15 years was I think a lot more than I would in like if you look at where my level actually settles without having those competitive events. Like I get my fill of constructed when I play it in constructed tournaments, which I do enjoy. I like playing in constructed tournaments. Left to my own devices, I would mostly just draft whether it's cube or whatever the limited set is, or maybe older formats. So we're actually talking about getting an IPA draft together on the server, so we might do that too.
Okay.
But there's tons of awesome games to play. Play Baldur's Gate 3, go ahead. Like that game's sick. Tons of good games come out these days. Like the Switch has a lot of good games. There's a lot of games, and you can do non-gaming things. You can go out, you can cook, you can play sports, whatever it is that makes you happy. If Magic's not making you happy and it's your hobby, just like don't do it. It's very easy. If it's your job and it's not making you happy, well, you got tougher questions to answer, and that's something that creatives of every stripe have always had to deal with.
Yeah, that's for sure. I would say
one day Marshall's going to wake up and he's not going to care what time it is. And he's going to be like, well, why do I need all these watches?
I'm wearing 2 watches right now, by the way. I got an Apple Watch for Christmas and I'm testing it out. And then I just finished this one for the channel. And so I'm testing it out too. So I look pretty ridiculous.
There we go.
At the moment. Yeah. And I like that you're being proactive about it as well, Wood. I think that that's the right way to do it. The goal that Luis and I have the thing that we want to avoid is burnout, right? And I mean like the kind of burnout where you're like, I'm going to step away for a year, right? Like I don't want to touch a Magic card or in my case, a watch or a microphone or a video editor. Like I've done a lot of things in my life that have helped me balance that because I can kind of feel it when it's there. And if you just put your head down and keep going, you are going to smash into a wall and your body and mind are just going to be like, no, like I'm not doing this anymore. And my whole goal is to not get to that point. Of course, we go through ups and downs where we're more enthusiastic and excited about the thing that we're working on or playing, but then sometimes it's a little bit more like, yeah, I'm just kind of doing it. But then something comes out and it kind of sparks your interest. And I want to stay in that band. I do not want to get into the really highs and lows one where I'm, crashing out and can't stand it. And I mean, we all have Magic friends that are like, oh, I'm selling my collection. I'm never playing it, and then in 3 years they're back and they wish they didn't sell their collection. And it's like, I just don't want to be that person that's on that wavelength because it's not fun to go back and forth. And as Luis mentioned, for us, it's a professional obligation too. Next question or group of comments and questions comes from Jeremy, who says, hello, Marshall and Luis. I trust that you're doing well and that you had a great holiday season. Did you, Luis? Did you have a great holiday season?
I did. It was great. I would say that.
Mine ended up being pretty good too. I hope your families are doing well. Marshall, how's your mom doing? Oh, that's a good question. So I mentioned it, I think, on the show before, but this last summer, my mom had a cardiac arrest at home, which usually, I looked it up and it's like extremely low survival rate, somewhere around 3 or 4% if you have a cardiac arrest outside of a hospital. But my stepdad was a firefighter for his career, and he noticed that something was going on with her in the middle of the night, and he was able to do CPR until the paramedics arrived, where they did CPR, and they got her to the hospital. She was in a coma for 4 days or 3.5. I can't remember exactly. It was all a bit of a blur. And then she woke up. And normally that's the first step, but definitely not the last. That's like, okay, you're really relieved that you got that. But for the people that do survive, that's when the actual work starts, because it is extremely typical when your brain doesn't have oxygen for a period of time to have all types of complications, from being unable to walk and having to relearn it, fine motor skills, speech, thought, emotional balance, basically anything that the brain controls, which is kind of everything, can be affected. And then of course there's a reason that the heart stopped, and that can also come back up again, cause it to stop again. And then the person is back where they started. I don't know why, but for some reason we are extraordinarily lucky. And my mom did have a recovery period. She had broken ribs from the CPR. She had an issue with her arm from an IV. There was all types of stuff. But as she had to get a pacemaker and an automatic defibrillator installed, all this type of stuff. But I had my birthday dinner about a week and a half ago, and she was there, and she drove there herself, and she's on a bunch of medications, but she is back to her old self.
So
and
awesome.
I honestly can't believe it. Yeah, extremely lucky, really, really fortunate that things went that way. When she was in the coma, I had said my goodbyes sort of in my head. Like I read some of this stuff and I saw how, she was on life support. Like she couldn't breathe on her own, she's on a breathing machine. It's the worst case scenario, right? And she's in intensive care and all that stuff. And when she woke up, I couldn't believe it. And then she's just been on a steady progression back ever since. And, I got to give her a hug on my birthday. So she is, I think that if you knew her in like April and then you just didn't see her until now and you just went and had lunch with her, I don't think you could ever tell. Like she would probably tell you, oh, by the way, between the last time I saw you and when I saw you now, I kind of died. They probably wouldn't believe it. And by the way, that is exactly the type of thing my mom would say. So thanks for that, Jeremy. I appreciate it. He says, congratulations on the Ultimate Guard sponsorship. Does this mean that we'll be getting LR sleeves at some point? I bought mine years ago and used them in all my limited events, so they're getting a bit worn out. I'm not sure about that. We have a lot of stuff on the table with Ultimate Guard that we can do basically to benefit you, our viewers, including giveaways and stuff like that. And, I would say it's not impossible, but it's something that would be a little bit more down the line to do a collab like that. But it's something I'll put on the table for sure. I also still have some LR sleeves around. I just don't really have a good venue to sell them currently, or even to give them away currently. But Jeremy, maybe I can see you at an event or something and hook you up. Jeremy also says, Marshall, I really, really enjoyed your conversation with James on Humans of Magic. That's a podcast interview I did with James Sue. And he says, it was such a delight to listen to. You guys seem to connect really well. It would be cool if you could get him on LR sometime. I think he's mainly a constructed guy. Congratulations on the success of your watch channel. I definitely checked it out after that conversation and saw you have videos with over 2 million views. That's so cool. I'm honestly super happy for both you and LSV's successful ventures into YouTube. Also, it was really cool to hear your follow-up with getting to meet Wyatt in person. That was so awesome. That's a story I think I told on the podcast about the young viewer of my watch channel who I actually got to meet in real life. And then Jeremy continues and says, one thing I really appreciate about you guys' relationship is how you celebrate each other's successes. That is so huge. I appreciate your example of what a true friendship looks like. That is actually one of our strengths, Jeremy. Like Luis and I talk about a little bit on the show, but we will talk on the phone or, and we're very much cheerleaders for each other. Like we really, like I'm first in line, when Luis does something awesome, to tell him, great job. I'm really proud of you. This is great. Like it is really a strength of our friendship that, we're constantly propping each other up. We're constantly, pushing each other to do better and to try new things. And, and also, if something doesn't work out, we're there for each other. I appreciate you saying that, Jeremy, because that is one of my favorite things about my friendship with Luis as well. Well, that we're cheerleaders for each other. The part
you don't see is that we would most certainly, kind of revel in each other's failures, but there just haven't been enough of those to really get a chance at that.
That's right. Jeremy continues. Congratulations to all of this year's Lemmy winners, including Phyrexia will be one. Yay. And he says, anyways, thank you guys once again for all that you do for the community. I appreciate all that you do and wish you continued success this coming year. Thank you, Jeremy. That was just a lot of really nice, thoughtful stuff from you, and we really appreciate it. Ian says, after hearing about the hype from LSV and other content creators, I've been getting into Cube lately and have been looking at all the old card frames of cards that I didn't realize were that old. I've only been actively playing since 2019, but I've always loved MTG art and design and wanted to know if you prefer more modern designs or the older card frames. You definitely asked the right two guys about this one. Any specific sets that really left an impression design wise? Also love your podcast, and it's really made me appreciate Limited as a format. Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Ian, for all those kind of words. We like the old card frames. It's the short version.
I'm a little confused because when Ian says design, does it just mean like the aesthetics? Because if that's the case, yeah, I like the old card frames more. Old foils in particular look really good, especially in person. And just like the old card frames, I don't know that I've never really been able to fully figure it out because I know I'm being tricked by kind of, I don't even know if trick's the right word. I think that like Alpha and Legends cards look so good because they are specifically Alpha and Legends cards. They have this historical context and all that. And I think that's a valid reason to like something. You know, you don't just because liking something because it's old and has history is just one of the reasons you could like it. That said, I think that the newer Magic art is generally higher quality. At least it was a lot more all over the place. If you were to look at like sets from the first 5 years and sets from the last 5 years, there would be way more, I think, pretty bad art in the first 5 years. There was just some art that was really not very good. You know, objectively
low quality.
But I still love the history behind these cards. So like a good example is Time Walk, right? The Alpha Time Walk by Amy Weber is a iconic, fantastic piece of art. I enjoy looking at that art. I use that art when I play. That's the art that my Time Walk is on both Magic Online and in real life, you know. That being said, the updated Time Walk art, I think that's Chris Rom. Let me just check real quick because I really like this art as well, and that is Chris Rom. And that's the one where
with the disc and the little person walking on it?
You know, the main character in the view is she's got a sword. She's hanging on the side of like a big sundial, and there's like moons going either way. I think that's actually a higher quality piece of art. Like, I think if you asked a bunch of people who, you know, didn't know Magic, which of these is higher quality art, almost everyone I think would say that the newer one is better because I think just probably been a lot more advances in a lot of different ways, right? In terms of art direction, in terms of what they're looking for stylistically, the details higher, their budget has gone up, you know, like a lot of awesome artists were contracted for the original art, but I imagine it was at times that they were a lot cheaper than they would be afterwards, partially because Magic made them more successful, right? So I do like the older cards and older card frames and all that, but I know a lot of that is steeped in history. So if you don't have that connection, you don't feel that connection, I wouldn't like blame someone. It's, you know, if someone says, I like the newer stuff better, I think they look better. That's totally fine.
Yeah. You know, the two things that stand out for me is one, even if the old art was occasionally significantly less quality wise, it had more personality. It was more differentiatable. They took a lot more shots on like not having it be a cohesive design strategy. It was much more like, hey, do whatever you want. Like whatever comes to your mind, go for it. Right. So it might be some abstract painting. It might be, you know, an attempt at a hero looking person or something like that. But it varied a lot more and it made it more unique, more weird. It's kind of like, you know, if there's a band that you love, and their first album, they recorded themselves and you can hear some weird stuff in the background and the songs are all kind of all over the map, but like it just works and you just really love that one. And then they end up being successful and you listen to their seventh album and they're super produced. They have a sound, all the songs kind of grouped together and you're like, okay, I get it. I get where they're coming from and it's perfection as far as recording goes. You can definitely appreciate the latter, but the former just has like it sticks in your heart a little bit more. It's kind of like if you're looking to find a partner in life or something, right? Like you don't actually want a perfect human being, right? It's the weird little things about them that make you fall in love or make you go, oh, that's my person, right? Like they do this weird thing that nobody else does. It's not like you look at that person and say, oh, they look perfect in a photograph or they never make a mistake or whatever. That's not, I like having those rough edges because I think they kind of give you something to hang on to emotionally. And I do miss those. And then the other question that Ian asked was there a design set or anything like that stuck with us design wise? And for me, it's Arabian Nights for sure. I still think that Arabian Nights set logo is the GOAT. Like I think it's the best looking set symbol that they've ever had.
The scimitar.
It also is indicative of what happened. It's a symbol of that set and the thing that set was based on. And it also is one of the sets that they brought things together, right? Like you do see a thread between them where like, if you look at Alpha, there really wasn't one. It was all over the map. But if you look at Arabian Nights, it was like, okay, but it was still different enough stylistically that the artists could kind of do what they wanted to do. But, there's a lot of deserts and there's a lot of people and there's a lot of things like that worked. Is there any set like that for you, Luis, that stands out?
I think Arabian is awesome. I think Invasion specifically just looks really good. Mm-hmm. Like gold cards are so cool. Invasion had some really nice dark foils, which I liked. And I like the Invasion lands, like all of that kind of added up to Invasion feeling like a very stylistically sound set for me.
Okay. Next question comes from actually another Ian. And this one says, hi guys, I'm an experienced player on Magic and Arena that can, as Ryan Spain would say, consistently go infinite with gems and gold. However, I have never played on Magic Online. Watching Luis draft Vintage Cube and listening to you guys talk about it has really tempting me to finally give Magic Online a try. While I'm confident I can manage the interface issues in playing, quote, Excel Magic, I have no idea how the Magic Online economy works and how much it would realistically cost me to start playing Vintage Cube, especially considering what appears to be the somewhat steep learning curve it has. Could you guys explain how the Magic Online economy works and address how long you think it would take for someone like me to get to a point where they weren't just giving their opponents free wins? Yeah, for
Absolutely
sure, Ian. Yeah. It's shorter than you think, I think, especially if you feel confident about the interface stuff, because there is a learning curve to the interface. Once you get it, it's actually very good. Like it's thorough. It covers all the bases. It's just, I would put it akin to like learning Photoshop. Right? If you've ever tried to edit a photo in Photoshop and you haven't used it before, you open it up and you're like, I don't even know where to start. Like this is just a whole brick of menus and texts and things. And there's no flow to it, right? Because Photoshop is used for so many different things, from making logos to, editing photographs to creating new assets and all this stuff. And it's like, so there is no like, okay, start here, then open this, then do this, then edit it, and then export it. If you go to a different program, like for example, Adobe Lightroom, which is their photo specific editing, it actually does have a flow, an import, edit it, export it, that kind of thing. And you can kind of figure that out. Magic Online is kind of like Photoshop. It's like, well, you're here, I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff at you and you're going to have to figure it out. And of course, the frustration level can be very high. But if you are willing to get over that hump, the economics, especially for a good player like you, Ian, are actually pretty good. The system is based on a totally different thing than Arena, in that it's based on what they called digital objects when it came out, which means that you own the cards. Now, technically, legally, you don't. Technically, they do. Like if they shut down, they don't have to give you anything. But as long as Magic Online exists, those cards in your collection are yours and they can be sold and or traded elsewhere. And so that's kind of a weird situation for if you're going to be opening actual booster packs that do actual drafts, because you get the cards and you can sell them. And it creates a loop that you would do similar to what you might do at a local game store, where you go there, you buy your packs. And then if all you care about is drafting, you sell your cards back to the store for credit and you try to recoup as much of the cost as possible each time. But Vintage Cube is not like that. It is Phantom. So it's similar to what you're used to on Arena, where you draft the cards. If you do like Arena Cube, for example, and you don't keep them, you get to play with them for that event, and then they just disappear back into the ether, and you pay a price to do that. The price is actually very high when you first look at it, but the way that it actually works isn't so bad, which is that it's 10 tickets, which are worth just slightly less than $1. So think $10, or it's 100 what they call play points. And you can earn play points by playing in events. They are part of the prize that you get back. And the simplest way to look at Vintage Cube is if you play a normal Vintage Cube draft, you go 2-1. So you're going to play 3 rounds. You will get 100 play points back. And that's how much it takes to re-enter a cube event.
Yeah. When I said absolutely not, it's because I don't really know how the economy of Magic Online works, except for if you go 2-1, you get your money back in a draft. And that's kind of about where I end on it. But that was a very good and detailed explanation, Marshall.
Thank you. And you should 100% do it, by the way. Next comes from our old friend Scalding Hot Soup, who said, by the way, good, apropos of today, Louise says you're going to be too souping it. Says, for Marshall, what are the top 3 most memorable guests or interviews you've had during your career on coverage? Oh, great question. Off the top of my head, wow, that's tough. Well, I'll just go with what comes to my mind. One of them was an interview that I didn't do, but that I was standing there and watching, which was with Christian Calcano after he top 8'd. It was with BDM. They're both from the New York area. BDM has known Calcano since he was a kid, and he top 8'd the Pro Tour. It was a really touching moment, and also to get to see 2 people who I really like, have that moment in front of the camera and everything as well. Calcano was crying and BDM was cheering up. It was really awesome. So that was one of them. Another one I remember was a really bad interview that when I was first starting out that I got saddled with. It was with a guy from, where was he from? Estonia. And he was a nice guy, but just not really much of a talker. And English wasn't his first language. And I don't think he really knew why he was being interviewed, and somebody had grabbed him. And so I would ask him questions and he would just give me like one, or he'd be like, yes. And I'd be like, oh, okay. So I guess I'll ask the next question. And then he would say, not really. And that was it. And I had to like fight him the whole time on that. Another one that comes to mind was one of the first times I met Mike Segrist. He won a GP, I believe it was in Washington, D.C., and I did an interview with him. And I didn't really know him at that point. And he ended up being somebody I got to know really well, because he never left the Pro Tour after that, and he ran it right up. He ended up being really awesome player. That ended up being kind of his breakthrough to get to the PT and stick there. But he was an old school player who I just didn't know, wasn't really aware of. And at the time that he won, he was more of like an East Coast grinder, high level player or whatever. And I remember interviewing him, and I liked him right away. I just thought, this guy's super nice. We got along really good. Tons of people were standing around to watch the interview. And at the GP during those days, that wasn't usually the case. Most of the time it was like just their friends or family. But it was obvious that this guy was beloved in the community, because he had a ton of people there to watch the interview. And I remember thinking, I like that guy. I hope he sticks around. And like, he's been around ever since. So that was cool. Next one comes from Robert, who says, hi guys, hypothetical question here. If R&D had truly unlimited resources, how many main sets would you like to see them put out every year? New sets are fun and novel, but if there was a new one every week, there would be no time to actually master anything. What do you think the ideal number would be? It is more than 4, right?
I feel like every 2 months would be pretty nice. 6.
Yeah.
Can we trade all the ancillary products and secret layers and all the other sets that they make just for 6 draftable main sets?
I like that.
Sound like a deal?
I think 6 I would make that deal. I think 6 is right. I think that after 2 months, right at that point, you're kind of going, okay, I've done the things. That's when I start looking for Vintage Cube. Right. So if we could cut it there, I like that. So 6 is the answer. Scalding Hot Soup pops up once again. This one's for Luis. What are the top 3 most memorable matches you've had during your pro MTG career? And just do like the ones that come to your mind, because there's probably interviews I forgot too,
Yeah, I think that certainly the number one is my match against Nassif at the finals of PT Kyoto.
Yeah,
that we've actually even did a breakdown on that one. That entire match, we re-recorded it, commentary on the match. That was great.
That is on the LR YouTube channel, by the way.
Yeah, that one it was really good. I remember it really sticks in my head. My playing my quarterfinals match against Antonino De Rosa in the top 8 of U.S. Nationals 2006.
7, yeah.
2006, because that was the first tournament I ever did well at, and me and Cheon got onto the U.S. national team. But he finished first. He beat me in the top 4, and I finished third. And the top 3 went to Worlds as the team. Ben Lundquist, actually the third member, and that beating Antonino in the top 8, it was like, at this point, Antonino was like, he had been a former U.S. national champion. He was like on the pro tour. I had never, like, I'd played a couple pro tours, but I wasn't on the pro tour. And
he's also a well-known player at that time, right? I mean,
he was a pro. He was
he's also a very big personality.
Yeah, he's all those things. And beating him in the top 8, and it was also weird because it was, I remember at the time feeling, you'd go into one of these matches again. It's like kind of like if someone were to face me or were to face Reed, they'd be intimidated a lot of the time. I felt that, except when I was playing against Antonino, I'm like, wait, my deck's actually really good in this matchup, and I actually remember like doing a pretty good job juking him, where like I took out Signet's game 2, and when he brought in Viridian Shaman, 3-mana 2/2 kill an artifact, and then he took them out, and I had brought my Signets back in. Like, I'm not saying I played circles around him, but because there's an element of randomness to both those things, but I managed to see the thing he was going to do for game 2, side them out, and then I didn't play any in like a really long game 2, and then game 3 I brought them back in because you know what, I bet he's going to take these out. So
that's great.
So I guess I'm not saying I did play circles around him, but I did play circles around him. So
that's what I was going to say.
And then my last one definitely has to be my match against Tommy Wallabies, playing for top 8 of Pro Tour London, my second Pro Tour and our third Pro Tour. And I still remember because a lot of things. One, I could have drawn. We could have ID'd. He would have made top 8. He would have been 8th. Or 7th, and I would have been 8th or 9th. And it was a really tough decision because if we drew and I got 8th, obviously that's the best outcome. I'd be super happy. I had top 8 at Pro Tour. I couldn't even believe it, If we played and I lost, I was 100% out. I finished 14th because, spoiler, I did lose. And if we played and I won, I was definitely in. I would be like 3rd or 4th. The problem was I thought that I was going to be 9th. And the biggest other reason would be if I drew and then got 9th instead of 8th, I would still make like $2,000 or $3,000 more dollars, which was a pretty big deal to me. I was in school still, I was in college, that would have been nice. But I was like, I don't care. I don't care if I draw myself out of top 8 where I could have played and made top 8 of a pro tour. I'll never forgive myself. If I play this and I lose, then I'm okay with that. And that's what happened. I did play, I did lose, and I'm still happy I played instead of it. Also, it was a ridiculous match where at one point I cast a card called Choice of Damnations. It's 5 and a black sorcery. Your opponent chooses a number, and then they have to either, and then you get to choose. They lose that much life. So straight up, if they choose too high of a number, you make them just lose all their life. Or they sacrifice they sacrifice down to that many permanents. So if they choose a really low number, like 2, you would just make them sack down to 2 permanents. Obviously, they can't choose that either. And I cast it when he had about 20 permanents in play, like 15 to 20, like a ton, and not a lot of life. So he had to choose 1 lower than his life total. He chose 6 when he was at 7. And I made him sacrifice down to 6 permanents from like 20, including lands. And I still managed to, I couldn't win that game. I couldn't quite get through. And game 2 rather, I was down a game. He had no cards in his deck, and he cast a spell on his upkeep and then cast Hinder, which is a counter spell that puts the card on the top or the bottom to not get decked.
Oh, man.
And the sick part was I knew that was going to happen because he had put Hinder on the bottom of his deck like 15 turns before he had a card, and where like you reveal your cards and you can put it on the top or bottom. And I knew Hinder was his last card. I just knew this was going to happen, but I had to play it out anyway.
Yeah.
Crazy match. My brother was even there watching in London. He came on the trip with me, and
oh man,
it would have been really nice to win that and top 8 of PT. But I'm like I said, I'm just glad I played for it.
Yeah, and that also set the tone for really the rest of your career in life, right? Where you're like,
Where
I'm
I'm
going to
just
bet on
getting
me. I'm going to
unlucky
go for it. Yeah,
really
no,
clutch
not,
spots.
not
Yeah,
that,
no,
not that far. Charles says, is a mostly arena player who only dusts off MTGO for cubes. I was wondering what you two think arena needs to have a truly great cube, like a hypothetical. If the people in charge of arena came to you and asked you to give them a list of like 50 cards that they will implement in order to get over the line and push it to be competitive with the MTGO vintage cube. Power is already implemented, so you get that for free. If you want them, that is. What type of cards, archetypes, and stuff would you push?
That's actually a really good question.
I just like it to just be the vintage cube, but
Well, so there's basically two kind of schools of thought here, that, or at least for me, I have both schools contained within me. One is, do you just ask for as many of the cards that aren't in the online on Arena that are in the vintage cube to get a close approximation to the vintage cube? Because that's totally legit. Like, if you gave me what's currently on Arena plus Power 9 plus 50 other slots, I could probably get you pretty close to a vintage cube. I mean, you put in like Tinker, you put in just basically a lot of the big flagship cards, and then maybe some of the support stuff's like a little bit worse than it would have been otherwise, but that seems all totally reasonable. The other would be, well, could we make a new experience instead? Could we do something where maybe it has power and it has all the cards on Arena, but we're not necessarily just trying to recreate the vintage cube? I would be not surprised if that could also be doable, but I would have to look at the list to try to figure out what I would want to do in that particular case.
I like the mirroring. I'm in group 1. Just give me the dang thing. Daniel says, how do you teach people to play Magic? Whenever I teach someone, I never know where to start. I find that there are so many critical rules that depend on each other. For example, do you teach mana cost, when you can cast spells, what lands do, or life totals first? How do you decide what is most important to teach someone first? And how do you avoid going down rabbit holes and explaining things that a new player really doesn't need to know? By the way, interesting. I want to answer this in reverse, Daniel, because that is definitely the number one issue that I see with people teaching people is the rabbit holes. They start off with the idea of keeping it as simple as you can. But the first time that a weird rules interaction comes in, they're like, oh, well, the stack doesn't resolve in the order and it's just like, forget it. Like, you completely lost that person. This is way, way, way over their head. I'm totally fine playing a simplified version of Magic where, where those things don't happen. When I've taught people in the past before, I've built the decks that we're going to play with. They're monocolored. They only contain simple cards so that these things don't pop up. And I usually do start with those basics that you said. I said, you've got 20 life points and your goal is to get your opponent's life to 0. Okay. So that's like a good starting point. Well, how do I do that? Well, you're going to use the cards, in your deck and, from your hand, and you're going to try to utilize those cards to achieve that goal. Okay. Well, how do I pay my cards? Okay. Well, here's how the payment system works with the mana and all that. Okay. And then here's what each type of card does, right? And then the last thing, of course, that you want to try to ingrain in them as early as possible is like untap, upkeep, draw, right? Just that simple routine of a game of Magic, because that's not obvious at the beginning. And to me, that's enough. Like, if somebody can get a rough idea of those things at the beginning, I'm happy. Where I see people screw up is when they go too far. Magic cards are freaking complicated these days. And so I find it really useful to have I used to have decks that I used just for teaching, one of each color. And so I could say, you can pick, what's your favorite color? Don't worry about anything other than just like, oh, this one looks cool. I like the sun, I'll take white, or, ooh, black, that looks cool, I'll take that one. Right. And I tell them, it doesn't matter which one you pick. You can play all of them in whenever you want. And and they're smaller decks, they're monocolored, they're super basic. And I tried to do a little bit of showing what the color could do, like a blue will have a flyer in it, that type of thing. What about you, Luis? Is there any big pitfalls or anything that you find when teaching somebody?
Oh, I think the main thing that people kind of get wrong, and in my opinion, and this is in this case, as a game developer, teaching someone how to play a game is less about teaching them how to play a game and more showing them a fun experience that makes them want to play more. Like, I remember a really good example that Matt Place, my former boss, and someone who used to work at Wizard said when they had these kids and they were testing the Magic Online CD. This is back when it was released on a CD, where it would teach you how to play, teach you the rules, and then and they wanted to observe these kids learning. And I think these kids were like 10 years old or something. And the tutorial was like pretty exhaustive and very specific. And at the end of it, the kids all knew how to play Magic and all hated it. And it's like that a tutorial is not, and this is why you see some of the masterful game tutorials that are now it's not, here's a tutorial, here's instructions, and we're going to tell you what to do. It's here's level 1. All you know how to do is run and jump. Oh, look, now here's a rock and you can pick it up. And that's the tutorial teaching you, but it feels just like you're playing the game.
Right.
So for Magic, I don't really try to teach people very much at all. I just try to walk them through a game of Magic, give them the very broad strokes, very broad. You should almost always be doing less detail than what you think you should be doing.
Definitely.
If someone likes what's going on, they'll learn more. If they don't, they won't. And the idea isn't to like give them a video trailer where they don't do anything and they're just watching you play a game. But the idea is to really lean on the like, let's have a good time with it. Here's how we do that. Not, okay, here's your upkeep. And it's important to know that sometimes you want to play effects on upkeep. Oh, here's the draw step. You don't usually need to do much, but you know what? There's a card, Vendilion Clake, that's really good to play during their, like, don't say any of that stuff.
Don't say any of that stuff. Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't use the word upkeep, basically. But I also famously don't like the upkeep.
But you think
people get mad every time I say that.
Yeah, exactly. Next question comes from Matt, who says, Happy New Year's, gents. Thanks. Thank you always for being there. For all of us listeners each and every week, LR is a must listen every week, no matter how much is going on or not. Somehow you guys have found the right recipe of serious limited MTG and total nonsense. That's also the end of that comment. Oh, I see. There's another one down here. So I think Matt maybe split these up. Well, thank you, Matt. We appreciate especially the nonsense part. I noticed Arena did not offer a decathlon event this holiday season. I enjoy the challenge each individual event offers to try to queue for the final event. What are your thoughts on events like these? Do you think offering an event such as a decathlon provides a new territory for digital Magic to explore, or is it more casual engagement for players? Where does such an event fit into the Magic ecosystem between premier drafts, constructed queues, and arena opens, and cube in all forms? Lastly, did either of you miss it being offered? I will answer for both of us. We did not miss it being offered because I hardly know what it is. I believe it's like a thing where you do 10 different formats over the course of a month or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, it's something like you play a format, and if you got the ticket or like the prize for winning it, you go play it. You can play the next format and whatnot. I didn't play that either. No.
Yeah, I think these things are fine. I think I would probably put it into the category that you listed first, though, Matt. More of a casual engagement for players. Like, I don't really see this impacting bigger picture stuff in a meaningful way. It's just another cool thing to incentivize you to log on and play. I mean, that's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to get you to interact with their product as much as they possibly can. Now, that's not an evil thing. They're trying to do the way they try to do it is by making it fun and interesting and engaging and keeping you coming back. And if they make that way, then they did a good job. If they try to do it in some, other more nefarious, addictive way or something, that's not as cool. But this one seems totally fine to me. Next question comes from Kirsten, who says, hello, hope you both had a great Christmas and New Year. Thank you. With the introduction of play boosters, meaning that there will be less common slots in a pack, do you think that will lead to less versatile commons, as draft archetypes will need to work, so there will be less chaff potentially?
I could see that. Yeah. I mean, we're already not getting as many bad commons. So I wouldn't say less versatile commons. I would actually say it actually might lead to more versatile commons, because now you have fewer common slots, which means your common flyer also kind of wants to be a merfolk, so that it's good for the merfolk decks. Or the removal spell also lets you has cycling, or lets you discard a card, so it enables the deck that cares about filling your graveyard. Like, you're actually going to see cards that kind of fit into multiple decks, I think, a little bit more, just because they've got 5 common slots in this color left, and they need these cards to support 3 different decks. So yeah, some of them are going to do double duty.
Josh says, I really enjoyed your episodes discussing old Magic sets. As someone who started playing around Revised Stopped after Fallen Empires and didn't come back until 2018. It's been cool catching up on everything that I missed. I've similarly enjoyed the Resleevables and have been wondering when they will catch up to LR. Any chance for a crossover episode of your podcast on the same set? Actually, that could be interesting. I haven't thought about that. It would, we really love doing these episodes with TBS. You know, he was there on the ground floor when we had the idea for this type of thing. And, you know, he's kind of core to what we do on those episodes. So there could be an element of too many cooks in the kitchen if we get Cedric and or P. Sully in there. But I mean, that would be really fun, you know, just to hear their thoughts on the set versus ours, or, you know, we cover the limited, they cover the big picture, that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're friends with all those guys. Yeah. So that could be see a thing. At
least one of them today.
Well, there you go. So that could be a thing, Josh. We'll have to kick that around. I just would want to make sure that we can keep TBS in the loop, because we obviously can't have all 5 of us. You know, that would be more of a panel than a podcast. A couple more questions here. This one comes from Judah, who says, "Hey, Luis, I have loved the team drafts that you've been posting. I have a question around team draft strategy. There have been places where you have opened 2 comparable pieces of power, like 2 Moxen, as well as a key card for your deck, such as a Reanimate and Reanimator. Would you consider passing both and taking the card specifically for your deck, knowing your teammate will get a piece of power if you felt like it didn't particularly boost your strategy?"
Yeah, so there's been recently a pick that one of my friends from the draft server now, Mac Smith. If you've watched the videos, you definitely recognize him. Mac made a really good pick. He opened a pack that had Atraxa and 2 Moxes, right? And the Moxes were kind of effectively about the same. So what he ended up doing, which I thought was really good, was he took the Atraxa and then passed the 2 Moxes. And the main reason to do this is no matter what you take, their team's going to get a Mox, your team's going to get a Mox, and your team's going to get an Atraxa. There's no real world where there's any other option there, right? Because if he takes a Mox, the teammate takes a Mox, or his opponent takes a Mox next, and then your teammate gets the Atraxa. The main reason to do the pick that Mac made is Atraxa is a 10 out of 10 card in the right deck, and that right deck is kind of flexible, because that's why Atraxa is so good, but it doesn't work in every deck. So imagine a scenario where he takes a Mox, the opponent takes a Mox, and then the teammate whose first 2 picks were like Thalia Swords to Plowshares now is looking at a pack that has Atraxa and cards that are worse. They're probably going to either take a card that's worse or pass the Atraxa. Well, Mac, by pick 1ing Atraxa, he can just build a deck where Atraxa is good, and he just got a first pick incredible card, and then he just gave a Mox to the next 2 people. Now our team has 2 Moxes, or 1 Mox, and their team has a Mox. So that was an example of doing that. And yes, if I opened a pack that had like, you know, Mox Pearl, Mox Emerald, and Brain Freeze, and it's pack 3 and I'm a Storm combo deck, yeah, it makes sense for me to take a Brain Freeze, which is a bomb in my deck, and then my teammate gets a bomb and their team gets a bomb, as opposed to me taking a Mox, their team getting a Mox, my teammate getting a brick or something a lot worse.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's also something that you will only see in team draft. That's the only avenue where doing something like that actually makes sense. Great question, Judah. Next is from Tyler, who says, "When is a vintage cube version of Team Resources versus Team Lords coming? I hear Ben and Ethan have been jamming it lately." Well,
anytime they want, honestly,
we're ready.
I would be so happy.
Bring it. And then Nick says, "Hey guys, I love limited Magic, but I'm just okay. My 9-year-old son has learned everything he can from me, but I want to help support him in getting better if he wants that. He wins our home drafts and even went 3-0 at the LGS one time." Holy smokes, Nick, your 9-year-old is 3-0 in the LGS draft. That's really, really impressive. Any tips to help a kid access resources to take the next step as a Magic player? Well, you have a kid, Luis. Why don't you answer this one?
Well, I would say we're not at the same competition levels. I think.
But how old is Naya now?
7.
She's 7, so she's just a couple of years younger
games.
than
She likes
Nick's
card
kid.
games. She's not super into Magic, actually. So I think that trying to get someone to the next, or your kid to the next level in this particular case, I mean,
could Nick's son listen to the podcast? Like, would that be
definitely? Yeah, they could do that.
Okay.
Playing online would probably be the biggest thing, though.
Yeah, and that's a tough one for a parent, right? Because I know that there's always this struggle with screen time with children. I hear my friends who have kids talk about that all the time, where they're like, well, we're trying to be more aware of it, or we try to limit it, or we, there's certain times, like it's not just like, here's an iPad, go crazy, and, I'll see you tomorrow, kid, or whatever. Obviously, that's a personal parenting decision, but.
Yeah, I think that if that works, it depends on what you want to balance, because I certainly understand the screen time concerns. And if you are trying to limit that, then yeah, maybe not playing online is the best way. Podcasts are a little different if you're listening, and play more Magic with your kid. Give them more resources, like maybe reading articles could also be good. But I think just there's really no substitute for playing.
Yeah, to me, it's, and the reason that I kind of push this question over to you is I don't really have a great sense for what a 9-year-old can absorb, right? Like right. As far as high level strategic concepts or whatever, right? Like obviously Nick's 9-year-old is quite intelligent. Beating the home drafts and then even 3-0ing at an LGS one time is like, at 9 years old, I mean, that is really impressive. So, assuming that Nick's child is able to soak in, all this stuff, I mean, I would definitely do podcasts like ours. I mean, honestly, there's a reason why we keep our podcasts clean, right? Where we don't swear on here and stuff like that. And it's so that younger people can listen and not have to worry their parents.
Because profanity never touches my lips is why.
Yeah. You're really pure of lip. Let's just say, I mean, both of us are pretty bad, but yeah. And, so that, 9-year-olds can listen and not have to worry about it, that type of thing. I mean, it's maybe a little self-serving, but I would say, listen to this show. If your kid isn't listening already, Luis is right though. The only real thing is to get reps, and the way to get reps is to play online. That's how you do it. Arena drafts, Magic Online if applicable. I would recommend honestly, just arena drafts.
The best way I've found to become a truly world-class elite player is actually pretty simple. It's live with Paul Cheon and 2 other Magic players during college. Don't go to class, play Magic Online all day, then make a team of all great Magic players and go test for weeks in remote locations. If you do that, you'll probably be pretty good at Magic at the end of it.
It worked for you. Yeah. That, I think that I would probably frame things, Nick, in the lens of the 10,000 hours type thing, where right now your kid is putting in the work. And in order to do that, it's going to really take online play. So that's what I would recommend if your child has a goal of becoming a truly great Magic/limited player. Thanks everybody for these questions. These were, as always, fantastic. And we really look forward to doing these shows every cycle. We do one of these every set cycle. And if you want to get in on the questions, all you have to do is be a patron. It doesn't matter what level you're at. It can be $1. You can be brand new. There's no vetting period there. And I'll put up the thread for this right before we do the show. And you can jump in with your questions like so many of our patrons did here. And you can ask us anything you want. So thanks to everybody who supports us on Patreon, and specifically for the people who ask questions here. We really appreciate it. We also want to thank Ultimate Guard for their sponsorship of the show. It's really cool to have them on board, and we look forward to cool collaborations with them going forward. You can find us both on social media, Marshall_LR and Luis's LSV. And if you want to find everything related to the podcast, it's over at lrcast.com. If you look at the front page, I have links just right in the front to all of our stuff. So for example, you can get to the Limited Resources YouTube page. And if you search on there, I'll probably just dig up the link for it, but you can see that was actually one of the first rewinds that we did, where Luis and I sat down and went over his match at PT Kyoto. It's one of the greatest matches ever in Magic history. It is unbelievable match to watch just straight up, but with actually being able to ask Luis what he was thinking about in the moment, what he was feeling, it is a really cool insight. In fact, if you've got a free afternoon, it might be worth it to just watch the match straight up and then watch our version of it to kind of fill in any blanks that you might have been thinking about. It's really, really cool to see. And you can find Luis's YouTube channel for all this Vintage Cube content that we've been talking about. So you can check that out. And again, I put that all in the front, the Patreon link. It's all on the front page of lrcast.com. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
All right, I wanted to give follow up inspired by Cheon, actually, in his questions that he was spamming us with earlier today,
Mm-hmm.
with some cube tips and tricks.
Mm.
So what I want to do here is just talk about a few weird cube rules interactions for folks who might be playing and don't know them. Number one involves necromancy and animate dead. So when you're playing with these cards, these are enchantments that put a creature into play from the graveyard. One thing to note is that if you kill the necromancy or animate dead with the ability on the stack, so your opponent casts necromancy, say, or animate dead, and in response, to the ability triggering before the creature comes into play, you cast Disenchant, Tear Asunder, any of those cards, or Bounce. The creature will never come into play because the enchantment's not in play to bring it into play. It's no longer an aura there enchanting the creature. And that is a one way to protect yourself. If you have a Cathar Commando or something like that, if you have any sort of way to kill an enchantment against some reanimate decks, you actually just having an instant speed enchantment interaction prevents the reanimates, which is pretty neat. That doesn't come up all the time, but it's definitely worth knowing. Another thing about necromancy. So necromancy has a weird rules thing called substance. That's what lets you play it as an instant. And if you do, it gains substance and then dies end of turn. So what that means, though, is if you cast a necromancy off of a Shelldock Isle, or if you use Chandra Torch of Defiance +1 and exile necromancy, then cast it, it will die end of turn because you are casting it at a time when you could not cast an instant. Even if the rules are letting you, it actually wouldn't be a drawback if you cast an Animate Dead or any other spell this way. Necromancy just specifically says, if you cast this anytime you couldn't cast an instant, or couldn't cast a sorcery rather, I gain substance, and these are times when you actually couldn't cast a sorcery, even though the game's allowing you to do it. So, and in that vein, Teferi Time Raveler stops whoever has the Teferi Time Raveler, their opponent cannot cast spells off Shelldock Isle or cast spells off Chandra, because again, that ability is still resolving. You couldn't cast a sorcery at that time. Here's a funny one that came up recently. City of Traders is a very powerful land, taps for 2 colorless, but when you play another land, you sacrifice it. Well, if you play City of Traders as land number 2 and Lotus Field as land number 3, you can stack the triggers to sack the City of Traders to the Lotus Field.
Oh, that's
And then
cool.
the City of Traders ability resolves and does nothing because there's no City of Traders in play.
I did not know that.
Get a little bit of extra value. Another one is Sensei's Divining Top. So Sensei's Divining Top has the ability tap, draw a card, and put Sensei's Divining Top on top of your deck. One thing that's weird about it is the ability, you tap the top and the ability goes in the stack. It's not a cost to put the top on the top, which otherwise, because it wouldn't work, because if you paid it as a cost, it'd go on top and then you wouldn't draw the new card.
You just
But what that means is if you have a way to untap or sacrifice your Sensei's Divining Top, you can get additional value. So example, you have Manifold Key in play. You tap the top to draw a card. You have to hold down Control on Magic Online. In response, you use Manifold Key to untap the top and you tap it again. So what happens? Well, the second one resolves. You draw, top goes to the top. The first one then resolves, which says draw a card. So you draw the Sensei's top, and then there's no top in play to put back. So you just straight up drew an extra card. It works with Paradoxical Outcome. It works with Repeal. It works with Goblin Welder. Anything that lets you untap or remove the top will still let you keep the card draw ability of the tapping, which is a pretty substantial bonus, as it turns out.
That's sweet.
And yeah, those are just some ways to get a little bit more mileage out of your cards. Part of why Cube is fun is that there's all these different emergent interactions that don't necessarily always come up. And, sometimes you just knowing that these things are possibilities will help expand kind of what you do. And I have found a lot of fun discovering all these things. And it kind of reminds me of, I think one of the ways that I got better at Magic is I just spent a lot of time thinking about Magic plays I could make. Just weird plays I could make and why you would make them, and just as a kind of puzzle exercise. And I think that helps me find kind of weird creative plays that a lot of people might not find. I've just spent a lot of time thinking about ways to do weird things in Magic, and that has been a little bit useful.